All right, let's get started. Welcome to EFF's Spring Global Members Speakeasy. I'm Christian Romero. I'm our senior membership advocate. You've probably seen my name in your inbox before, or maybe we've met at a conference. Either way, I'm really glad to see y'all today. Um, if you're up for it, drop your name and where you're tuning in from in the chat. It's always like super cool to see where our community stretches around the world. And just real quick, oh, I'm learning that we have captions for this event, and I didn't know how to turn this on. So if you see on the bottom of your Zoom window, there should be a show captions button or a more button. And then you can find the captions settings there if that's something that would be helpful for you. Um, so yeah, each year we like to bring our fellow digital freedom supporters together to show what your support is powering. We're always experimenting with this format, so if you have any feedback, questions, anything like that, feel free to put them in the chat as well, or email us at events@eff.org. Um, I want to thank people again for showing up and for being an EFF member. The world is really hectic and weird right now, and we can only really defend digital privacy and free expression because of your support. So thank you. Um, Today, we're teaming up with Women in Security and Privacy to shine a light on the shady private companies that harvest, exploit, and sell our personal data and how we can fight back. It's a really important conversation right now. Like I said, if you have any questions during the panel, please put them in the chat. Our panelists are like super excited to answer some questions, so that'd be really great. And I'm going to save myself from rambling even more and introduce EFF's Associate Director of Community Organizing, Rory Meir.
Hey everyone, thank you, Christian. It's my turn to ramble now. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming. I'm Rory Meir, Associate Director of Community Organizing. I'm on EFF's activism team, and I'm lucky enough to work with a bunch of local organizers across the US and help with EFF fights on the local city, county, campus level. Um, and yeah, I'm really excited about today's conversation because I have memories of there being a better internet being possible. I
Nice.
have kind of a traditional millennial history of having a childhood without the internet, and then I remember the internet coming to our house and it being a really exciting um, new change that you're able to engage with people all around the world, see, for better or worse, the weird little websites people put out there, and it felt very peer-to-peer. And I think really importantly, you could work with those people. You could kind of treat the internet as a commons, contributing to things like Wikipedia, and even engaging on advocacy that there could be someone fighting for freedom on the other side of the world, and you could dedicate some amount of work and help further that effort. And I think this kind of global community of the internet is what I remember and hold on to, and is something that I think a lot of folks are feeling. It's still there, but there's still kind of a feeling of it going away. And I think the last 20 years, we've really seen these companies, these bigger companies grow, kind of giving away services for free until they had this powerful position and they could shape the norms of the internet and shape regulations around the internet. And now we're at a point where life online is mediated by corporations more than ever, that depending on what you're trying to do, there's only a handful of names that we all know that can kind of get in your way or involved with it, even though it's your work. Um, and there, during that same time, there was also an important turn towards surveillance, aligning all of their financial interests to create this environment where that is hostile towards our privacy as the user. And in that wake of these big movers changing the environment, we see a plethora of smaller companies with that are harder to track, with less accountability, taking advantage of this new normal and this new status quo and taking advantage of users ultimately and their lack of privacy. And as Cory Doctorow coined, we're now in this phase of enshittification that even the good stuff that got us hooked initially is getting a little bit worse. It's a little more geared towards the financial interests rather than the user interests. Um, and we're at a point where many folks are just choosing to be online less, ditch social media, and have no social media as much as they can. So we went from this internet that meant open exchange and volunteerism and commons to a highly mediated and ultimately dangerous place. Surveillance, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is creepy, but it's not just creepy. It also chills speech. It's a vehicle for discrimination. And ultimately, data about you can be used against you by law enforcement and others since it doesn't have context and is inaccurate. To buck this trend, though, we need to understand how we got here and what we can do as individuals, as communities, and as advocates and pushing back. The internet has been a global project during this whole time, and I'm glad we have a global event talking about this because everyone here, it's a global effort to push back and um, kind of fight for the internet that is right for the users and right for us. Um, so to help answer these questions, because God knows I don't know all the answers to these things, I have a great expert panel joining us today. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Lena.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lena. I'm a staff technologist at EFF. I work on Privacy Badger, which is EFF's free browser extension that blocks trackers to stop companies from spying on you online. I highly recommend it if you don't use it already. And I also support EFF's work around consumer privacy, the data broker industry, and the harms of surveillance-based advertising.
Thank you. And now Mitch.
Yeah, I'm Mitch Stoltz. I'm the EFF's IP litigation director. Amazingly, I've been at EFF close to 14 years. I lead our work on fighting the abuses of copyright, patent, and trademark laws to interfere with speech, innovation, and privacy. And I also lead EFF's competition working group, where we look at all the ways that monopoly power and a lack of competition in tech markets complicates our work around speech and privacy and what we can do about that.
Thank you, Mitch. And finally,
Hi, everybody. I'm Yael Grauer, and I am a program manager at Consumer Reports, where I do cybersecurity research and I manage Security Planner, which is a free guide to staying safer online, where we get to recommend great tools like Privacy Badger.
great. Thank you, panel. As Christian said earlier, we're going to have about 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So if we touch on something you want us to expand on, please drop the question once you have it, and we'll collect them all for that end portion. But yeah, to get things started, yeah, I want to get back to that cause of how we're at where we are today. And I was hoping maybe Mitch could get us started with how is it that we're in a situation where just a few major tech companies seem to be dictating so much of our life online?
Yeah, thanks, Rory. Right. So there's you get two questions. There's how big tech got big, and then there's how they stayed on top. Um, how that got big, right? There really was lots of innovation early on. And when we say that companies like Google, Meta, Apple, and Amazon are monopolists, it doesn't mean they didn't innovate and don't continue to innovate. There was a lot of innovation combined with very fast scaling that gave them the advantages of network effects early on. That was the start. Um, the more interesting thing now is how those companies stayed on top and essentially broke the cycle of innovation that led to different companies becoming the center of the tech ecosystem. Um, there were a number of ways, and recently the courts have uncovered them and ruled many of them as to be violations of the antitrust laws. One was barring competitors through exclusive contracting and revenue sharing payments. So, for example, Google's multi-billion dollar payments to Apple, Samsung, and others in return for making Google Search the exclusive search engine at various access points on our devices. Um, Another was simply the scale of their data collection. So monopoly power both enables and is enabled by massive consumer surveillance, hoovering up all of our personal data through all the various apps that we use and that are part of these big tech ecosystems gives companies like Google and Meta a scale advantage that others just can't match in terms of targeting advertising. And then that advertising itself, so court was recently found that Google is taking a monopolist's share of ad revenues, money that rightfully should have gone to to publishers, is going to Google, because of the way its advertising markets are set up and its advertising ecosystem. So that's the sort of vicious cycle of surveillance and monopoly. Another way they maintain their power is basically by refusing to interoperate. So Apple, for example, simply blocks competing app stores and has made them largely impossible. Google, and a court found this recently, has also successfully blocked competing app stores, but they do it in a more subtle way, often by tying access to their various other services to developers' exclusive use of the Google Play Store instead of competing app stores, or other ways of distributing apps. And then both Google and Apple limited the ways that app developers are allowed to communicate with their users. And then the result is both of them have been able to skim a massively large percentage of the fees that people pay for example, in-app purchases, app upgrades, things of that sort, on the order of 25 to 30%. Which is massive if you think you compare that, the fees that credit card companies take on payments are somewhere between 3 and 5%. And then finally, another way that they've maintained their power is by buying up potential competition, and sort of Meta is the poster child for this, because they over the years used personal data gleaned from their various apps to identify acquisition targets, companies that aren't posing a competitive threat in the present, but that they understand will pose a competitive threat in the future. And that's, for example, how they targeted Instagram and WhatsApp for acquisition. And there's a active case by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission looking at potentially unwinding those mergers, which would be a pretty epochal step. And then another just negative side effect of all of this monopoly power is their ability to block legal reform. Just seeing all of the tech CEOs standing behind the president at inauguration, seeing their massive presence in DC and Brussels and other capitals right now, has made any kind of successful internet regulation so much harder, both on the competition side and on the privacy side. One of the reasons we don't have comprehensive consumer privacy regulation in the U.S. At the federal level, right, is simply the scale and influence of some of the companies that are bent on preventing it. Well, I'll leave it there, but just to say this is the environment against which all of our current privacy woes are happening. Now, these are not the only companies violating our privacy, but they certainly set the tone.
Yeah, and it's really harrowing that, they solidified their power, and now it's hard to challenge that power, and they're having all these influences on the internet as we know it. And I was hoping we could talk a little bit more about how these companies are using that power to erode our privacy online. And I was thinking if Lena, if you wanted to take that one.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the business model of a lot of the big tech companies that Mitch mentioned is surveillance-based advertising. These companies are financially motivated to collect as much information about people as possible in order to sell highly targeted ads. And so that sort of influences all of the products and internet infrastructure they develop. Companies like Google and Meta aren't just tracking you when you use their services. They're using their immense reach and power to track you online and offline, all across the web. So they've embedded tracking code across websites and apps by providing ads and analytics services. Google, for example, has trackers present on about 75% of top websites. And a lot of people think that tracking just is synonymous with cookies, but tech companies have come up with other ways to track people, oftentimes in response to the fact that people and browsers are starting have blocked a lot of browsers and people have blocked third-party cookies. But that doesn't necessarily make people safe from tracking. Like if you're signed into a website or app with your email, it can share your email with Meta or Google in a way that they claim is anonymous, or they claim it's anonymous because it's hashed, but they're still sharing data in a way that allows companies to enhance their detailed profile of you. Companies like Meta and Google encourage businesses to share information about, offline purchases that people make. There's a lot of different ways that big tech companies track you, but the end result is that they're profiting from pretty detailed profiles of our lives, and that can include the websites we visit, the places we go offline, and who we have relationships with.
And it's super unclear. And I know, Yael, you have some thoughts on, from the consumer side, all these practices happening in the shadows. But
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really annoying about a lot of these companies is that they make their privacy policies really confusing or disjointed. So you might think that a company doesn't have access to your data or isn't selling or sharing your data, but they actually are. And they're like, oh yeah, there's this secret page buried somewhere across like 5 different pages. So it's really hard. Even when they try to do it, they don't always do it well. And some of these organizations will have like privacy and security checkups. But even with those, it's really hard to track what is where and what setting you have. And then to make it worse, it's constantly changing. So you might have your settings exactly how you want them. And then there's a new software update, and then you go back in and it's suddenly like defaulted to sharing something publicly. So then you have to change the settings again, or there's a new setting that's on default. This just happened to me a few days ago. I had to change my Venmo settings because they're now letting people search by phone number and email, which I didn't know, and it was on by default. So it's I think that's one of the consumer unfriendly thing a lot of companies do.
Really. And I'm hoping we could stick with you, and I'm hoping to switch. So we're talking about the big companies, Google, Meta, whatnot. But there's a whole suite of smaller companies that are trying to benefit from today's status quo. In my notes for today, I called them unethical go-getters. But I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that environment in this data collection.
Yeah, so there's a lot of data brokers. There's like hundreds of data brokers, big ones, small ones, and they collect data. A lot of it is considered publicly available data. So there are exemptions in a lot of state privacy laws that say, this doesn't apply to publicly available data, but that data can include, real estate data. So basically everything that you want to keep private. And a lot of times it's really difficult to remove it. There are some states that have some laws that allow you to try to remove it, but there's again these exemptions. A lot of people don't even know about it. It's basically a full-time job to try to figure out who has your data and try to get it removed. And you can't always do it completely, which is really annoying.
And
And
Lena, do you want to add to that from the network you were
yeah,
guessing? Yeah.
Yael has made so many great resources for um, protecting yourself from people search sites, and even though it's tedious, like guides to opting yourself out of those. But there's a whole there are hundreds of data brokers who it's hard to even know if they have your information, because it's not as public facing. But the data that they collect and sell about people can still lead to a lot of harm. So there are data brokers who will directly pay apps for data about their users. Oftentimes, this involves paying apps to incorporate some of the data broker's code through an SDK, which then sends information to the data broker, like the precise location signals of people using an app. Xmode is an example of a data broker that did this. They collected, I think, 10 billion location signals per day for a period of time, and sold it to a host of problematic buyers. I think they sold it to law enforcement, to predatory companies. Mobile Walla is a location data broker. They also traffic in people's location data, but they obtained that sensitive information in what I think is maybe an even creepier way because of how common it is. Mobile Walla was listening in on real-time bidding systems, which power nearly every ad you see online. Basically, every time you see a targeted ad, there has been a milliseconds long auction where your information is broadcast to potentially thousands of advertisers to bid on your attention. But some of those advertisers might be data brokers in disguise who aren't interested in placing ads, but instead they want an easy way to collect massive amounts of data. So this location data broker, Mobile Walla, for a period of time, collected 60% of their precise location data just by eavesdropping on these online advertising systems that are hooked up to most of the apps and websites people use. So I think that there are small there's the some of the data brokers that you see when you Google your own name, but there's also smaller data brokers that have a big impact, and you might never hear about them unless you're a shady actor who's trying to buy people's precise location information.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just mentioned a lot of scary things in passing there, which kind of gets to, yeah, it's not just about it being creepy or uncomfortable, which I'm sure a lot of folks get into privacy because of that. There are these like real world uses of this information. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, or maybe Mitch wanted to.
Really quickly, I'll just mention like high level, like once surveillance infrastructure exists for advertising, it can be co-opted by all sorts of bad actors. So data brokers who see themselves as like marketing companies have had their data bought and used by scammers, predatory companies, law enforcement without a warrant. I mean, to give a specific example, like scammers bought data from Epsilon, a marketing data broker, to find elderly people who would be susceptible to their scams. And what concerns me is that for each example of real world harm that we know about, there are probably hundreds more similar examples that we never learn about because the data broker industry is so opaque and underregulated, and that makes it almost impossible to trace who's buying your data and what they're doing with it.
I just add, we know that there are sort of political communications firms and other really pretty overt purveyors of misinformation who are buying this data and using it to target divisive and inflammatory messaging, to influence elections. Of course, this has been going on for a long time, and we know about it. And the other one I'll mention, right, is data breaches. Wherever there is a collection of valuable personal data, it is a target for breach and exfiltration. And of course, we see high-profile, disastrous data breaches, from all sorts of companies every year, and that's a symptom of this acquisition of bigger and bigger pools of personal data.
And the term I really like for that from Bruce Schneier is data as a toxic asset. That kind of by collecting this data, you are running that risk of either it being misused or breached and falling into whoever's hands. So, with that scary note in mind, we can maybe get more optimistic and talk about what can people, companies, communities do to start mitigating these harms. And I was hoping, Yael, you could kick us off with that.
Yeah, I really like that term. But I think like a really obvious thing is not, just don't put things online if you don't want them to be public. And I know that's easier said than done, but like you can take steps to limit what information you share publicly by not posting it. You can also try to adjust privacy settings as best you can, which can be important. You know, like I have had a lot of friends who are like, "Oh, I didn't realize that my running path is public," on their app or whatever. And you can limit the data each app on your phone can access. So these are like a few measures you can do. Another thing I spend a lot of time doing is looking at transparency policies and what companies are selling and sharing data with police. I just read an article about airlines selling consumer data to law enforcement for warrantless searches. So that's something that I think we need more transparency and accountability about.
Of them, but I mean, we're talking half an ounce.
I don't think I quite got that, but yeah, was something that Lena mentioned that I do is I spend a lot of time teaching people how to remove information from people search sites, which you can do manually, which is annoying, but and time consuming, but it can be somewhat effective for at least reducing your public footprint. It's not 100% effective because there's just some information that's next to impossible to get out. But I think somebody in the questions asked about easy opt-out. So we tested a bunch of these services with All Poppy about a year ago, and some work better than others. And easy opt-outs was one of the best performing ones, and it's only $20 a year. So if you are going to manually opt out, that makes it a lot easier. Another one that did really well was Optory, but it was their highest tier, which is like $240 a year. So those are a few things, but also just keeping like, we do this in a community. So like I will let my friends know, did you know that you posted your location? Like, do you want these pictures public? Just things like that, just to kind of keep an eye out for people around you who maybe are not as tech savvy.
Yeah, and on that community point, prior to joining EFF, I founded a local cybersecurity education group in New York called Cyber Collective, and have been working on the kind of more community level education work that goes with this. And I think two of the things that like I really want to hammer home for folks that are trying to improve this is one is privacy and data protection as a hygienic process that you're not going to in one afternoon knock out everyone trying to surveil you and protect all of your information completely. That it's kind of ongoing, and you do unfortunately need to keep checking the settings. You do need to keep checking the opt-outs and kind of do it continually. And then the other one is that privacy is a team sport, that it's great to work on that privacy for yourself, but even just helping a few other folks that selfishly is helping your privacy when people can infer things about you when your community is not being surveilled as well. But also it just kind of creates privacy as more of a norm in a community. And one of the main resources to direct folks to is EFF's Surveillance Self-Defense resource, ssd.eff.org, which has a lot of walkthroughs and explainers of how to up your privacy game. And then, of course, installing things like Privacy Badger, which does a lot of that in the background. You don't have to babysit it as carefully as a lot of the other kind of DIY stuff. But so that's all kind of the individual and community. Let's talk about reform. Let's talk about changing things with companies and regulators. I don't know who wants to grab this one first, but what changes do we need to see? How should companies and regulation around these practices be changed?
I'll mention one thing. We at EFF think that interoperability and compatibility are powerful tools for user choice and competition, and then ultimately empowering users to keep control of their data. Interoperability, among other things, creates a meaningful ability to exit. So it means that can leave a platform that's not living up to your privacy expectations without leaving your, for example, your friend network, your contacts, your personal data, or any of those things behind when you leave. Um, so and there are a number of ways that sort of tools for getting towards that world, but people should that people can support. But one is open standards and protocols, federated social network protocols, and others that folks are using. There's been some attempt to mandate these, particularly in the EU, with the Digital Markets Act, to require those sort of big dominant platforms to interoperate. Those are tricky. It's tricky to get those right in a way that preserves the privacy of people's communications, and that really makes meaningful change. But we're engaging in that process, and we have high hopes for it, and others should, particularly with, like I said, the European Commission, and then also supporting. There've been similar proposals in the U.S. From time to time, requirements that would really just apply to the largest online platforms, that they have to make their systems interoperable. For example, supporting competing app stores, supporting the interoperability of various different sort of important online services. And then the other half of that, we call it competitive compatibility, or sometimes we call it adversarial interoperability, but it's basically the ability to build tools that work with existing platforms without the cooperation of the owners of the existing platforms. So much change has happened just this way, and there's so many examples of wonderful alternative clients for the major social networks, alternative clients for chat apps. For those to have a chance to succeed, when we have to work on reforming the laws that are used to stop them, the abuses of copyright law, abuses of patent law, of computer intrusion law, like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Um, um, Creating robust exceptions to those will give people the ability to do self-help, by, for example, creating more privacy protective client app for the social networks and other online platforms that they use.
And I'll add an exciting thing about interoperability, and like Mitch knows, we talk a lot about Fediverse and Blue Sky and those things. I get very excited about, and it's also something that can benefit the companies themselves to adopt. It is something they could choose to publish a open API or open protocol. You get a whole community of people building tools for the thing you're hoping that they use, and I think that's a exciting pull for folks. But kind of staying on kind of company changes and practices. I don't know if Yael, if you wanted to speak a little bit about what else can people working at maybe a small company can help change, or we should look for regulations for changing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's been touched on a lot already, but like, don't collect data that you don't need. Like, there's a lot of companies that will just hoover up tons of data, and yeah, I like the term toxic asset because basically, you're basically leaving, it's at risk of being compromised, and you're usually not even using it anyway. So what is the point? So I think it's great to fight for data minimization, whether that's on the policy level or just pushing companies to practice it. And um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the other issue is that if you are collecting any kind of data or transmitting any kind of data, like location data, and you have bad security, it doesn't matter how good your privacy policies are. People probably read there was a paper that just came out of Georgia Tech about Tiles being able to track all users. They should turn on end-to-end encryption. You should use better protocols. So there's a lot of preventable issues that are actually security issues, but they end up becoming privacy issues and making people vulnerable to things like stalking, etc. That I think we should be pushing for. I mean,
Yeah,
against pushing against.
and if anyone didn't catch that, Tile is a kind of an alternative to Apple AirTags for like tagging a thing, which you know can throw it in someone's bag and know where they are potentially if there aren't good protections. So. But yeah, and before turning it over to questions, we're doing good on time, but I was hoping, Lena or Mitch, if you wanted to chat about kind of governmental regulations, like what is beyond kind of appealing to the companies and that we actually need to regulate.
Yeah, I mean, a strong federal privacy law is so long overdue. I think, much action is happening more at the state level for political reasons. And I think that what's really important to keep in mind is that not all privacy laws are created equal. There are some state privacy laws that are basically based off of big tech's ideal preferences for privacy regulation, and they don't actually provide meaningful protection for people. And even when states do have better privacy laws, they don't provide much protection unless they're enforced. EFF always advocates for a private right of action in privacy laws, meaning that anyone can sue to hold companies accountable for violating their privacy laws, not just potentially understaffed and under-resourced government agencies otherwise, like government enforcement won't be able to keep up with the scale and pace at which privacy laws are being broken online. And yeah, there's a lot. Mitch might talk about it too. There's a lot that EFF wants to see in privacy laws to make them stronger than what a lot of states have. But one more thing I want to highlight is EFF advocates for a ban on online behavioral ads, meaning ads targeted based on people's online or offline behavior. That is the root cause of so many of the privacy violations we see online. And if we don't address that, companies will keep finding creative ways to track people, and it'll be like, we'll be playing a game of whack-a-mole, trying to keep up with the ways that companies skirt around privacy protections. So ads don't have to be targeted in creepy surveillance-based ways. There's contextual advertising, and unless we change the underlying financial incentives of our tech companies, they're likely to keep surveilling us.
So I'd love to get to questions. I'm seeing great questions in the chat, but I'll just, to what Lena said, I'll just add, I think we need in terms of laws, a two-pronged approach. One is strong privacy laws, consumer privacy laws that just set the minimum expectations for all companies at the federal level. But we'd like to see the experimentation at the state level as well. The other prong is robust antitrust enforcement. And the reason we need both is to both set minimum standards of behavior for companies of all sizes, and then to prevent the sort of corporate structures that have incentive to violate privacy on a massive scale and to subvert and avoid any meaningful regulation. So that's the overall approach.
Great. So yeah, I also want to switch over to questions. We're going to have about 15 minutes, and we have a lot of great questions, which is exciting, if not a little overwhelming. So I was thinking maybe we could start with a question from David that I'll direct to Lena regarding Privacy Badger. Are there good options for Safari on iOS or Mac? For example, is uBlock Origin Lite and built-in privacy settings enough?
Yeah, unfortunately, Privacy Badger is not on Safari yet. We're waiting on certain features to be added that Privacy Badger relies on. uBlock Lite, Ghostery are both options that you can use on Safari, and I would say that something about Privacy Badger and what Rory said about privacy is a team sport. I think that something that's just as important as using Privacy Badger yourself is telling your friends and family about it. And I assume that people on this call all already have some basic level of understanding of online surveillance. Most people don't. And Privacy Badger is meant to be used as a community, like it's a political tool. We want to disrupt surveillance business models together. So individually, it can do a great job, like protecting your own data and preventing some of it from being used against you. But it really is supposed to work like at a community level to stop the online surveillance we've been talking about.
Yeah, tracker blockers and ad blockers in general have been called the largest consumer boycott in history. So they are both an individual tool and a collective statement.
I also want to highlight, Lena, you had published a blog, I think a couple of months ago on EFF site, also about bringing tools like Privacy Badger to librarians and info workers that, these are pretty inoffensive tools that don't break sites kind of as the design. And, not everyone thinks about these things, and those kind of people with admin control over other devices might be interested too in hearing about it. I'm gonna have another one that I think is a response to Mitch from Samuel that what made companies that started by developing awesome people-oriented projects like Google, Apple, and Facebook turn into these data collecting behemoths they are today. What is the villain origin story? That's my own editorial. But yeah, Mitch, if you have thoughts on.
I think a lot of it had to do with network effect. I think having hit on this model of scaling really fast, gaining network effects, then I think the constant pursuit of short-term shareholder value led to them looking for ways to build walls against competition to then be able to maintain those positions, less from innovating and more from simply building these walls.
Anything to add, Yael or Lena? I'll move on. I have one from Rebecca McKinnon. Other than supporting EFF, what do you urge EFF members to do, especially for those who work in the tech industry? I could get us started on this. So in addition to being a supporting member, thank you again, y'all, for enabling our work. There's also our Action Alert mailing list. Maybe seems like a small ask, but we are very deliberate about when we reach out to the people on our mailing list. If we are telling you it's important for you to call up a rep or to sign on to something, it's actually a very important time. So you don't have to feel like it's maybe going into the void. We're very deliberate about our outreach. So responding to that. And then, of course, on my end of things with local support, you can always reach out to organizing@eff.org. We work with local organizers. We've worked with people who work at a tech company and want to change things from inside. We've worked with students on campus, local advocates trying to change things in a city ordinance. So reaching out through there if you want to kind of get into the advocacy side. So those are kind of top of my mind of reaching out in that way, organizing with your peers, and yeah, supporting EFF, which y'all are already doing. Anything folks want to add on what do we want folks to get activated on?
We also have an advocacy site. If people want to check it out, I can post a link.
Please.
Um,
Advocacy, consumer reports that are. Yep.
in addition to all of the sort of like community education stuff we've been talking about, I think that supporting enforcement of privacy laws is really important. A lot of states with privacy laws have portals where you can submit complaints about data privacy violations you see. I think there's probably some people in this audience who have the technical skills to support enforcement work, and I think that is a big I think there's a gap between what the law says and what is actually happening on websites and apps. I think it's a lot harder for privacy regulators also to investigate apps. Like there's just more, there's more built-in tools for people to see tracking on websites than mobile apps. So if you're an EFF supporter who also has the technical skills to analyze apps, I think that there's room for everyone to help uh, call expose tracking that should that might be illegal and deserves enforcement action.
That's good. Good addition.
Yeah, I think just sharing that information with whoever, like, I find out about things that I want to work on because people tell me about them. I don't always know about them, so I think just letting people know about what is going on.
Definitely. Yeah, people kind of see big organization like Consumer Reports or EFF, and it's like they probably know everything that's going on, but we really rely on folks sending us an email with updates. So
And
I have a
besides
question.
us, I'd say
Yeah,
you should, let your state and local officials know too.
yeah,
Just a call to a state legislator saying, I support strong enforcement of the state consumer privacy laws. That can have a pretty strong effect. You wouldn't think so, but that they tally those calls and they use it to set priorities.
But big tech is doing that already, so we need
yeah.
to we need to make our voices heard too.
Great. So turning to, I have a couple of questions that are kind of consumer privacy focused. So one from Scott. I would just love to hear the panel's thoughts about VPNs, that they try to use VPNs. And yeah, sorry, many services seem to break when it's on and they're browsing. So is this like them deliberately breaking it because they detect a VPN? Are there ways around it? And I think just general privacy thoughts on using VPNs, if anyone wants to grab that.
It depends on the VPN exactly what's going on, but a lot of times the services break because they detect the VPN. So it's actually better than you thinking that you're secured by the VPN when you're not. Um, but this is a complicated question because it really depends on which VPN you're using and what service you're trying to access. I don't know. I don't, and then I don't think it also kind of depends on the reason that you're using a VPN. Like if you're just gonna turn off your VPN if something breaks, like does it defeat the purpose? Like depends on why are you using it. And we actually have an article I can link to because I think a lot of people are using VPNs because they don't actually know what they do. And not even here, of course, but in general, I've talked to a lot of people who use VPNs because they think that it's giving them a level of security that either they already have because of the rollout of HTTPS. Uh, has been so massive, or they think they're getting a level of protection that they're actually not getting because of advertising. So yeah, it's complicated. I'm interested. I'm sure Lena has more thoughts.
Um, yeah, I would say that, like VPNs are good for trying to make your internet traffic look like it's coming from somewhere it's not. It can be one part of your privacy toolkit, but I think that VPNs don't do as much as people think, and it's really important to choose a trustworthy VPN because there are a lot of VPNs. Like VPNs are adding another company to your like browsing experience, and there are VPN companies that aren't trustworthy and are actually like collecting data about you through your use of the VPN. So just like browser extensions can be helpful privacy tools. There have even been, like privacy and security browser extensions, specifically Avast, that were caught, you know, collecting and selling people's browsing history, doing like exactly what they claim to be protecting people from. So be careful with the tech products you choose, with, even if they are marketed as privacy tools.
Okay. Yeah, and to emphasize, I think that question of trust, do you trust this VPN more than your internet service provider? And that's ultimately like the trade you're making with that. So another question. So this is about electric vehicles from Chase. They were talking about these vehicles requiring connectivity to the cloud all the time. Nothing could go wrong with that. You never drive places without a connection. That's my own editorializing. So what privacy options should folks search for to reduce their data collection to what is strictly needed for functional purposes? And I'll broaden this a little bit to kind of this issue of uh, any device that we buy that has this that used to be like just a toaster or just a blender, and now it's this always online data collection device. So what are some ways folks can reduce that data, and how does that happen if folks want to approach it from that angle too?
So I'll mention for home devices, it's more difficult for vehicles. But one is having the smart devices in your home connect through a separate Wi-Fi network, often with a wireless router at home. You can create a separate sort of less secure network so that those devices, which are often not built as securely as personal computing devices are, um, if they should be compromised, they won't compromise the data on, for example, your phone. That's that is that is one. Vehicles are hard because of, that technology stack is far more locked down, and um, uh, manufacturers have fought very hard to prevent people from changing uh, the way those work and changing the settings. But I would certainly look for what the opt-out uh, abilities that they give you. And they're not going to publicize them very much, but they'll probably be in the manuals or so, and ways to limit the amount of data that they're sharing.
I don't know if you have anything about vehicles or just more generally these functional devices with this added privacy invasion.
There are like this is a place where you can actually try to opt out depending on the state that you live in. There's like you're not completely opting out, but you're limiting the use and disclosure of information or asking for a deletion of it. So there's different forms I can put to I can throw in another link. And then there's some of them that have synced mobile apps that control your data privacy settings, and you can sometimes change the settings a little. But again, I feel like these are kind of band-aid solutions, and what we need is better legislation.
Oh, okay. And then this might be the penultimate question, second to last question. So how much do we know about the efficacy of legislation like California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, in reducing collection of data? What can we ask our officials to improve in this legislation? I don't know who wants to jump on that first.
I would say that I can also post a link in the chat. I've seen some academic research on this with mixed results. I think that there's a lot of tracking that's getting through the CCPA because of the enforcement issues I mentioned earlier. Without a private right of action, I mean, the California is better than most states because at least there's like a dedicated agency for privacy um, enforcement. But even still, I think that there's still a lot of like low hanging fruit. And at the same time, there has been meaningful actions to enforce the CCPA, and that's still not enough. And that's why we need a private right of action. I'm curious what you think, Mitch and Yael. It is always a little disappointing to think that like maybe the best privacy law we have at the state level still isn't still isn't necessarily being enforced enough to give everyone easy privacy by default. But that doesn't mean that it hasn't been helpful.
I would agree with that. And I think, Lena, you had already mentioned sort of our two big asks. One is a private right of action. let people and plaintiffs' lawyers and so on enforce privacy even when the government doesn't have the resources to do it. And I think just a ban on behavioral advertising across the board would really do a lot there. And I don't think that exists in any of the state privacy laws right now.
I agree with that. And also data minimization, the state laws that have data minimization, I think is great.
So I'll throw in one last question, even though we're really close to the end. This is an interesting one that involves a lot of offline things, but Greg shares that children are plagued by a lot of private companies who extort families for kids' images and data on a condition of participation for like every extracurricular activity that kids sign up for, from soccer to baseball, orchestra, fencing, that you have this to summarize this kind of vague language of I grant this company the right to use, reproduce, distribute, etc. These works, at the door before you're able to use it. So, how can we opt out or fight back against that sort of coercive sign up? I'll also share personally, I went up to Fort Bragg to the skunk train, which everyone in California should check out, and they make you sign up before you can go on the rail bikes. And I had a real, I work at EFF. Should I be granting all this stuff about my image? But anyway, if anyone has thoughts on that norm or online equivalents to that norm that we could push back on.
I mean, two answers. One is that unfortunately, like we need our privacy laws to protect us from, sort of coercive situations where we don't have a meaningful ability to consent or opt out or opt into data collection. You shouldn't have to like pay for privacy. It should be a right that everyone enjoys and not something that you have to like sacrifice in experience or more money to have. So yeah, we need better laws. And second, I mean, I think it's important to not like normalize this mass surveillance at the corporate and the government level. I think even in times where like you might not have a choice, I think it's important to like say something either to the company that has put you in that situation or like the people around you so that if you're not if you are forced into surveillance it's not you're at least not you're at least trying to disrupt the normalization of like pervasive omnipresent surveillance.
Yeah. And it emphasizes it's not all just individual choice that we're kind of put in these positions that we have to push back on together. So on that note, I think we are out of time for questions. So I'm going to throw it back over to Christian for some ending notes. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you, panel. And throwing it over to Christian.
Yeah, I'm back from the ether. Thanks, everyone. That's all the time we have for. It seems like everyone has a lot of homework. There's so many links flying around, so good luck. I wasn't expecting this to be a huge homework sesh. Another big thank you to Lena, Mitch, Rory, and Yael for joining us today. I'm really glad we got to partner with Women in Security and Privacy on this event. It was great to have Yael's expertise here and to work with those folks. I'm putting WISP's link in the chat for another piece of homework if people want to learn more about them. And thanks to everyone who joined, submitted a question. It's really great to see people here and just see how interactive the chat is. There were a lot of really great conversation going on. Again, if you have feedback, feel free to send it to events@eff.org. We're monitoring that. We'd love to hear what you thought of the event. And otherwise, thanks again for your support, and we'll see y'all later.